Hello and well met. This is founder Laerun with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Happy holidays. Today we're going to do the kind of something I'll do occasionally is the map challenges. So basically I'll find a random map and just try to practice using the map tools. And it's the best way to get yourself familiar with how it works. Also, it keeps you up to date on the changes that are being made. So if you need to evolve, those are things that will help you understand and wrap your mind around using the map tools. I'm going to go through a few traditional things that I want to make sure that people understand. If they've just tuned in, they haven't ever watched any of these episodes. So basically, creating a module. It's called the Oracle of Three. Right now, I'm working on putting the line of sight and all of the details on the maps. I've already done a few, so there's some past videos if you want to watch. I have a playlist. The platform itself is evolving, so some of the buttons on the right-hand side have changed. And then also the map tools evolves too over time. So if you watch an older episode, it may function a little differently. But all in all, it's pretty much the same thing. So this is a high fantasy kind of Fey-touched type of campaign world that I'm working on. It's basically just going to be a module accessory setting type thing where you can plug it into any setting in the 5th edition rule set. Might move it to Pathfinder if it does well. I might even try to kickstart it. We'll see. But one of the things I want to do is share the process with those of you who are watching. So this assumes that you have content. In this case, I don't really need a lot of things loaded. Probably just the SRD because I'm going to use a lot of custom things. I'm going to try to keep this content a lot less reliant on Wizards of the Coast products. So if I do anything, I'll have to publish it on the DM's Guild because at this point, the Forge won't support this type of module, so I'd have to put on the DM's Guild, and I don't know if I want to do that yet, so we'll see. But basically, I'm going to just take the maps that I have, and these were created by Mopsy, so if you guys are wanting to commission any maps, he does a pretty good job. I mean, his quality has increased over the last few years. He used to make his maps a lot darker and a little bit simpler, and they've come a long ways, so pretty proud of him for kind of coming out of his shell. He was very quiet and such. Got to know him over the years, and now he's starting to really open up. And I got him working on some other projects too. So he doesn't charge a whole lot, at least for me, because we're acquainted. But he does do a pretty good job. So if you need any maps, get a hold of Mopsy in our community and the Fantasy Grounds Academy Discord. The links will be in the description at the end of the video. And let's get going. And happy holidays, by the way. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve. And today it is December 23rd, 2021. Just for those that wondering how old the video is. I always put some kind of marker in there so you know that the content is not too old. So, or maybe it's too old, depending on when you see this. So what I'm going to do is go into my campaign folder, and this is the new interface. So if I come over here to the right-hand side, there's a campaign button. I'll drop that down. In here are all the regular banners that we're used to seeing. I'm going to go in and open up the images area. And in the images area, I have a series of different maps. I'm going to filter this group to the Oracle of Three because that's where all these are stored at. You can show them all at once. If you have anything uncategorized, it would show up there. These are categorized, so they're actually part of the module. So if you're ever creating content, you want to make these groups and make sure that your content is in there. And if it's not, you can always drop this down and drag these into the groups that they belong. So I'm doing the hard part first of the process of creating modules. So you do all the artwork first, do all the NPCs, all the items. That's the bulk of the work. Everything else kind of is a lot easier when you make the story entries and such. I usually do that at the end. So I have an outline and I have an idea of what I need to do. Now I'm just taking and plugging all that data in. But I want to get all the harder, more difficult things basically created first. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to be doing the Ranger map today, which is one of the destinations on the adventure path. If you are on the adventure and you go through this module, one of the stops here is the Ranger camp. So it's called the Wildwood Rangers Camp. So I'm going to open this up. And when I do that, there's a couple things that I do to help organize this. So in this list, there are a bunch of things here. And this says Wildwood Rangers Camp down here. So in the title up here on the top left, I'm going to put the word map in front of it with a comma. And the reason I'm doing this is for the sake of organization. So when I look at this list here, now I know that all the maps are grouped together and they're going to be alphabetical. So as I go through all these images, I'm going to put that little precursor in there, and that's going to help me keep this thing organized and not such a mess. It really helps you focus your sight on what's what. So I've already done the upriver map, which is the regional map. I think I'm going to add some more effects to it, but basically the Rangers camp is in this area, and that's what I'm working on right now. So that's going to be this here. So we have a little bit of the river in here. We've got a trail and an embankment that goes down. There's some trees. There's a campfire. There's some abandoned tents and such, and then there's this abandoned lodge-like thing that has caved in and decayed over the years. But this is the map I'm going to be working on today. And to make this simpler on myself, in case I close it, is on the very top left corner. If I click on this little square up here, just single left click, hold my left mouse button, and drag it down to the hotkeys. That way, if I accidentally close it, I can just pop this right back up. And it's so much easier to do than trying to figure out like what happened and such. So that's what I'm going to be doing now, is just kind of going through and creating content based on this map here. So this is going to be the Rangers camp that I'm working on, and this is where it exists on the map, but I've already done the fallen tree. Still need to do the ant colony and the beehive, and also I just did the map part for the opening here, this little Fey area. Well, that was a lot of fun. Let me see if I can pull that up, because that's a really cool map. This was probably one of my favorites that Mopsy's ever done for me. So if I go to, yeah, this is the Wildwood, Wildwood. I have it spelt wrong, so this is a good chance to come back and fix these. It's supposed to be Wildwood, not Wildwood. But this is the map that I worked on last time, I believe. So really not a complicated map. It just took a little thought about how I want to present it. It's kind of a big map. In regards to Fantasy Grounds, anything larger than this is going to probably be a little excessive or large. So if I expanded this image would take up like most of the screen. So if you had this at full size. So this was the encounter area for the Fey area. So the colorful Fey forest is basically one of my favorite maps. It's really colorful. It's beautiful how it turned out. I love it. And I even put like a little bit of water shimmering in the background, and there's some shading in there. So it's going to be a lot of fun to run that. All right, so the Wildwood Rangers Camp. So when you're working with the map tools, it's nice to have a clean slate or organized if you can help it. It's also something you don't want to do right in the middle of the game if you can help it. But one of the things I do is I'll stretch this frame out so that I can have access to the entire image or most of it. And then I'll just adjust it accordingly. Once I have it there, then it's centered. I can drop down the toggle toolbar, which is up in the upper right corner by the lock. Drop that down, and then there's a zoom to fit button. So I click that, and that zooms it out so that we can see the entire map. This map is going to feature both indoor, outdoor. You're going to have terrain. I'm going to probably put terrain on these tents just so it blocks light a little bit. There's a campfire that's not it's not active, but you could easily put a light on there and toggle it on or off if you wanted to use the campfire. And then, of course, there's this little river down here, so probably put water effect on there. And I'll put the terrain on these larger trees so that it has some little bit of shadow and definition to the area. And then obviously we're going to put walls and line of sight in here because some of these walls have fallen apart. I requested that Mopsy create it this way so that we're basically going to get light coming through here. So they're not really going to be windows, but these are broken walls that have decayed over a while. There's a little bit of fungus and some of the roof has collapsed in, so it's going to be it's going to be interesting to make this because it's going to be kind of a mix of walls and openings. So it's not a true shelter like a lot of the ceilings caved in. So the shadowed areas are basically where the ceiling still exists, but there's holes, so that's where the light areas are. Mopsy and I discussed that, like how we want to do it. Here's the porch that's kind of fallen apart. So it's an interesting map that we're going to be working with today. I like that it's going to be diverse enough so I can show you more of the tool. Some of the other maps in this adventure are very simple. It was just a few terrain things, but this one's going to be a little bit more complex. So it'll be a good example of good fresh example of how to use the tool. All right, so first things first is the map is expanded out so I can see more of it. If you get off, or if it's like, gets to the point where the map itself is like way over here or something like that, all you have to do is click the center, zoom to fit, or you can right click and go to view, and then you can do zoom to fit or zoom to fill, or you can sync the client view, which allows you to resize it accordingly to your players if you're the host. But I'm going to go to zoom to fit, and it's nice and centered right now. And then what I'm going to do is put the grid on there. So if I go to the grid tool, when you turn it on, by default, it's at 50 by 50. I think that's a little large because you have a 50 by 50 doorway. So that is how many pixels per square. So that's a little bit too small. So I'm going to double it, go to 100 by 100. Because I know that the doorway is not 10 feet wide. So that's pretty much the majority of putting down the grid. And then the other thing I like to do in this case is I'm going to make the grid yellow or orange instead of this kind of washed out gray color. So if I go to the tint area, click on the yellow coloring in these color grid, I can make this yellow and then adjust the brightness and the transparency. So I like to have it a little bit above at the middle so you can still see the grid, but it's not too obnoxious. So maybe turn that down just a hair. So you want the grid to be there, but you don't necessarily need it to be super bright. Some people prefer that. I like it to where it's like balanced. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, because I don't want to cover up the artwork of the map, and I certainly don't want to get to the point where I can't see what's going on. So it's a good balance to have the contrast of what you're doing. And I didn't use a color like green or brown or gray because that'll wash out and it'll be too meshed into the color scheme. So I kind of use a brighter color that kind of stands out. You can use pink or purple or whatever, but I like to use more natural colors. So kind of a dull yellow is fine. The other thing is just remember each one of these is 5 feet. So that's the most important part, is to put the grid on here. And then I'm going to lock the map. So once you have the grid on it and you're happy with it, then you lock the map. And another thing you're looking for is on the right-hand side, it's lined up, on the corners here, it's actually lined up on the square. So that's a good sign. Usually, if it's a half square or a full square in there, it's usually okay. Just depends on the actual pixels per inch on your map. So this one's 100 by 100, obviously, so that's cool. All right, the next thing is let's start thinking about the line of sight and how we want to approach putting the line of sight on the maps. Usually on a map like this, I'll start with all of the outside stuff or the things that need terrain. So I will go into the map tools, which is the line of sight icon on the top, looks like a brick wall. And then there's a little terrain tool, which is this little Christmas tree. And then right now I'm in the select mode, so I'm going to go to line mode, and I'm just going to go through and line out some of this terrain. I don't necessarily have to go right to the edge, nor do I have to go through the entire object. So this tree, probably only the top part is actually hidden. So I'm just going to click around. Doesn't even have to be perfect. And it's just going to be one of those things where it's there just to kind of cast shadow. You're not really trying to block anything. So all I'm doing is clicking around near the top of the tree as opposed to the entire tree. Now, if this is a really thick little hedge or something, maybe, but you don't have to, cover the entire object. You actually want the players to see some of the branches. Otherwise, it's just really not a piece of artwork. It's just an object that sits out in space and it blocks everything so you can't see anything. That's not really what you're trying to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and do all the terrain stuff right now. So I want to stay in the same tool so I'm not switching back and forth, because what you'll do initially is you'll try to do something like this, and then you're switching to try to fix something, and you're going back to it. That's where this thing can be very time consuming and frustrating. So try to do all of your stuff in one go and not switching back and forth. So on the tents, I'm just going to kind of follow the contour and just kind of put this on here. It doesn't need to be right at the edge, so I'm leaving a little bit of that so that people can see it when they walk up to it. Because really all I'm doing is blocking shadow, making a shadow here. It's not fully going to be blocked by anything. It kind of has a way to allow for people's imagination to envision what's going on here. So these won't look just like a rectangle or something. You want it to actually have some contrast. So that's basically the first part of this, is to use one tool, take a look at it, and when you're done with that tool, if there's any lines that you weren't happy with, you can always go back and fix those. So if I go back to the selection tool, I can come back here and pick one of the points and drag them as I want. So I can take each one of these points, move them. I think that's what I'm doing here, is just kind of tightening this up a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I am bringing it to the wall and getting it to be a little bit closer to the edge. Maybe you got too close, so you can always go back and fix those. So try to stay in the tool and make your lines first, and then come back and do your adjustments all at once. If you do it incrementally, it can really take a long time. So you want to be more efficient. Just come back and make your adjustments after the fact. There's another tool that's included if you want to simplify this. So like if you come across a map that has a ton of data points and it's not needed, so all these little dots here, if you select, if you double click on here and you select all of these points, there is a simplify selected occluders. So if you click all of the points in the line and you click that button, it's going to remove some of the redundancy. It actually only took 1 point out of here, but if you have like a large circle and there's thousands of little dots on there, if you simplify the occluders, it will help your performance on the map. So if you're getting lag and that sort of thing, you can kind of cut back on that by reducing the amount of points. It's not necessary to have all of the points on a map sometimes. So I'm just going to adjust this accordingly. So it took out 1 point. But like I said, it depends on how it was drawn and what it is. Sometimes you don't want it to remove a point. So, and as you saw, I can move this entire shape. So if you double click on the line in here, it selects all these points. You just click in the middle and you can drag this around. So you can adjust as needed. So I'm going to come back over here and do the same thing. So just kind of single click on the points I want to adjust for. And then just take this and kind of move it to where you feel it's right. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, this is just a tree, so it doesn't have to be dead on or straight or anything like that. If you make it perfectly round or perfectly the contour of this, you're not going to see much of the detail of the trees. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is you don't need to be right on the edge. Kind of just letting some of this stuff show up and present itself to the imagination and to the people who view it. So again, I'm just kind of coming up and adjusting these lines up a little, kind of moving them in or out depending on what they are and what their function is. That's pretty good. That's pretty much all I need to do. So these are just minor adjustments, nothing major. Just taking a look to see what I've done. Some of these I might have come a little bit too close to the edge, so I might bring them in a little just so you can see more of the tents. Yeah, I think that's good. So when you're done with the tool, like let's say I'm considering that I'm done with the terrain, what I'm going to do is click on the play button, which is the dice up here on the top left of the tool, and then I'm going to click on the enable line of sight and the lighting. And what you're going to find is that there's not a whole lot of light here because I don't have anything defined for the ambient light. So I'm going to do that next. So I'm going to define, do I want it to be daytime or dusk, or do I want it to be nighttime, that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the lighting tool. And the reason why it's so dark is I'm in the Game Master view and there's no light source at all right now. There's no torches, there's no campfire, nothing. So what I'm going to do is take and put the actual lighting on here, but to put on a different layer, you can click away from whatever layer you're on, and then you can apply your line of sight. So when I get done, I'm going to select the Ranger's Camp again, and I'm going to put the line of sight back into the base map because that's where it's going to reside. So I'm going to go ahead and unclick or deselect, and then I'm going to go to the ambient lighting. You can use the drop down. I'm going to change it to dusk, and as you can see, it's already brightened that up some. And then I'm going to take and place the ambient color. You can change that if you want. I'm not going to mess with that. But you can change with the shadow. So if you already have shadow on your map, you can change the direction of a shadow. So I'm going to basically just follow what Mopsy already had on here and change the length of the shadows, kind of bring those in a little bit, maybe to 6 or 5. And that should be it. So it did have some shadow in here. It was kind of hard to tell because it's dusk. They're not as bright. But basically, it just allows the casting the shadow. And I'll just have the direction of the shadow follow what was already in here. So that's just a preference thing. But you can make the shadows longer depending on the time of year it is. Usually between like 6 and 12 is a good length. After that, it starts getting very long and kind of exaggerated. And that's pretty much it. If I want to change the time of day, if I go to sunlight, that brightens it up and the shadows become a little bit more apparent. So in this case, shadows are casting away from the tent, but you're starting to see where the line is. So I want to lengthen that shadow to past the tent at least. And that gives you some idea of what, so 10 is usually pretty good. Yep. So that's kind of following the shadow that's already coming off the building. And that's what you want to do with each step is check that out and get an idea of what it looks like and such. That way you're not having to backtrack at the end and fixing everything. So you're kind of doing it in steps or stages. It's very helpful to kind of work with a certain methodology in mind. All right, so the next step is I'm going to determine the area that I want affected by the light. So with the lighting that I have on now, if I leave it that way, it's going to create a problem with the outdoor lighting affecting the things that are inside of the cabin. So if you have an indoor and outdoor lighting situation, you have to define where the lighting is, where it ends. So Going to put a mask on the entire map first. So I'm going to click on mask. And then I'm going to just quarantine this area away from the lighting. So I'm basically blocking the light from affecting inside of the building at this point. So I'm just going to take the trace, and it's basically like a selection tool. And I'm going to go ahead and drop this on here. And as you can see, the lighting's been canceled out inside of the building, because that's something you don't really necessarily need or want. And that way it doesn't affect the lighting inside the building, in case you want to differentiate those. So now this is completely dark in here, which is kind of what you want. But if you have in the case of these areas where the building is collapsed, I can elect to reveal these areas. So if I want to, I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm just going to reveal just this area right here. So this will allow me to put an area where the light is shining through. So these are places where the ceiling is caved in. And that's why I'm doing this, because it's kind of an area that would show up in the areas as the ceiling fell. So we have an idea of where exactly the openings are in the ceiling, and also it gives us the impression that ceiling basically gives us the impression that the ceiling's caved in. So again, I'm going to come around here. Here's where, okay, there's where some light has come through. So you can reveal certain areas like this to give you that effect. So it's not all just one thing. Looks like there's actually more area here. So I'm going to go ahead and do this again. Come down in here, add to it. I didn't realize that there was so much more to this. There we go. So there's quite a big patch there where the ceiling fell. So these are spots in the ceiling that have been caved in. So that's kind of a cool little thing. And you can come to the doorways and tighten those up if you need to, or where the wall has fallen. But basically that's how this works. So now when I get to the line of sight part, I will just put the contour on the walls and then break out this area here. Or I might just leave it out altogether. I'll have to look at it. So that's basically the outdoor-indoor lighting effect. This way you're not affecting the light from the inside with all of the ambient lighting. So there's still shade and cover and shelter in here. The porch is kind of wrecked. But this would offer some shelter. But I think there's critters and rats and stuff that live in here. Maybe raccoons, who knows. So definitely possums. Alright, so now what we're going to do is start putting the actual line of sight on the building. So that would require that I go into the line of sight tool and then to the wall tool. And I'm going to just trace out different areas in the wall since it's not continuous. So this area here is a doorway, but the door is actually gone. But I'm going to go ahead and make it a door just so I can show you the doorways. And then I'm just going to trace this area on the outside. I don't need to really do too much. I think this is just going to be a little bit janky because it's not perfect. So I don't need to have perfect lines. But if you want straight lines, I'm going to go to the line tool. And you could start at some point just beyond the wall so you're not trying to figure out where to click. Just click beyond it so that you can adjust it later. And hold down the Shift key. And when you draw your line, that'll make it straight. So I'm in the line of sight tool and the wall tool, and I'm in line right now. And as you can see, I went past the wall. There's a reason for that. And now I'm going to go all the way across this wall here on the bottom. And what I'm doing is I start the line beyond where you're going to intersect and just draw all the way across. And holding the shift key will keep it straight. So you can do it freehand, or you can hold the shift key. So I'm just holding down the shift key, clicking on a point. You don't have to hold the mouse button down. Double click to end your line. We can always go back and delete these little tags here, and we will be able to adjust them. So don't worry about that too much. Now I'm going to draw this line up here, but I'm going to draw it short because this is actually a hole in the wall. I could make it a window. That's maybe what I would do, because it doesn't necessarily mean the entire wall is broken, but we'll see. I think I'll just leave it open. So again, I'm going to just hold the shift key, start a little bit beyond the area I want to go, and double click to finish the line. And it makes this job so much easier. So all I'm doing is systematically putting in these little walls here and just drawing past where I think I need to go, because I can go back and adjust those. You don't have to be perfect. This is much faster than going back and forth, making adjustments and that sort of thing. You can see I just kind of drew past where I really had to go. So in this area, I'm actually going to put a doorway in here, even though it doesn't really have a door. The door is probably kicked in or something. But just for the sake of showing, and also to note that this is a doorway, not just a walkway. So I'm going to go ahead and draw in a door. So I'm going to go to the door tool. I'm going to use the rectangle tool to make it easier on me. When you draw doors, you want to make them a little bit wider than you think. You can always go back and adjust them, but just for the time being, I'm just going to do that. And it looks like I got most of the walls in, and then here are the areas where the walls are kicked in or are broken or damaged. So that'll allow light through there. So that's kind of what we want. And then this unmasking here kind of gives you the impression that the ambient light is shining in, or it's coming from the top. So that's it. So now it's time to make some adjustments, and it's time to delete some things. But before I do that, I'm going to go back to the wall tool. I'm going to go back to the line tool, and I'm going to double click and make this little line here. So I just single click here, drag the mouse. You don't hold the key down, and then just click at any point. This makes this intersection at the doorway. Now I will go back to the selection tool, which allows you to select points and drag them and delete them and all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to get rid of this segment here so that the doorway is more free, and then I can adjust how wide the door is if I want. So I'm going to first get rid of this vertex here. So I double click here and hit delete. It's going to delete the excess line. And then I'm single clicking on this line here and hit the delete key, and it gets rid of the line in the center. Now that I'm in the selection tool, I can bring the doorway in so it's not quite as wide. You want to leave it a little wider so that when you're playing in play mode, which I'll go back to that, when this comes up, if it's too narrow, it's going to be difficult to click on it. So if you're way out here and you have it really thin, it's harder to click on it. So you want to bring this in a little bit. So that's what I've done. So I'm going to go back to the wall tool on line of sight. I can afford to bring this in a little bit. So that way it's not too crazy, but it's visible. So there we go. That's the door. Now these little tails, just single click, hit delete. If you double click, it will potentially delete the whole line. So you just single click on a point. You can either hit the delete key or you can click the remove selected points. In this case, I'm not going to remove it, but I'm going to bring it back. So I just dragged the line inward and it shrunk it down, so I don't have to stress on that or anything. I'm just going to go back and clean up these tails. So just single click, delete, single click, delete. So this makes this job a lot easier than trying to guess where you need to click. It just speeds up the process because you're not switching back and forth in the tool, like going from selection to drawing. That's when this actual map type stuff gets annoying and it gets to be cumbersome. If you're spending more than an hour on the map, it's probably not worth it, unless you're doing a commercial product, of course. But if you're just doing this for your table, more than likely it's unnecessary. This here, if you wanted to adjust this, you can grab a corner and make your adjustments if you want. So these are just things that help speed up the process. If you don't want to spend all day on these, you can just make your adjustments after the fact. You don't do them as you go, because it just switching back and forth from drawing and painting and then going to the selection tool is very redundant, and it is not efficient. So it's not a bad thing. You can do it that way, but it certainly takes a lot more time than it should. So here we're going to adjust this a little bit. I'll adjust this one a little bit. So it's really simple if you attack this kind of with a methodology. If you just go in blindly and start building stuff, it might take a while. So just take the time to look at the map and really consider, what is it you're trying to do? How important is it? All those things matter, because you can end up spending hours on something that doesn't need to be done. All right, so that's the actual building. So I'm going to check that out. So I'm going to go to the play mode, and I'm going to enable the line of sight. So if I turn that on, what you're going to find is this is how the Game Master view looks. This is a hybrid view. But if you hit Control P, this is the difference between toggling. This is the Game Master view. This is the player view. Game Master view, player view. That's because I have the player vision enabled. So another way you want to check this as well is to bring up your combat tracker. And I have this party token thing that I use for checking things out. So I put this on the map, take possession of it. This is basically, that's what I would see as a player. So that's why I have this token enabled. When you go into the building, you have to open the door first. That's basically what you're going to see without any form of light. Now, if you want light to come into the building, you can place artificial light on the outside to make it look like the light is shining in. You could do that if you wanted to. The other thing is maybe give this guy a candle or a torch. I'm going to give him a candle, since candles are not too big, and it still gives you an idea of where you're at. So if you come up here into the effects, which is this little running man, or it might be a wand. This depends on your theme. I'm going to take the candle preset, drag this onto the NPC or the player, and that will give them the candle. So when they move around, they'll be able to see a little bit. And being that it's daytime outside, see, they're going to remember what it looked like outside because they were out there. That's why you can kind of see a little bit out here, but they're inside the building, so it's hard for them to see out here like this. So they're only going to see what's inside here, and then they'll remember what they saw from the outside. So it kind of is like a fog of war. So that's that. And if you go to the lighting tool, it is still daytime. So, and then when I have the mask on and done, I go ahead and lock it. So we're almost finished. I'm just going to need some effects and then pretty much it. So I'm going to do one thing for the campfire to make it more convenient for the game master. So if he wants to use this for his campaign or for game, you can just toggle it on or off. So this is going to basically just be a light tool thing. So I'm going to go to the lighting area, which is under the lighting icon. I'm going to go to add lights. And I'm going to use a torch, which is about as close as you're going to get, unless you make a custom item. I do have one in this campaign. It's called Campfire, but I'm just going to show you the regular method. So in the lighting tool, I'm going to place that on the map so that it's an asset that's part of the maps, but it's going to be on a separate layer. I don't have any layers selected, so it'll create its own layer. So I'm going to go ahead and click this down selection, the drop down, click torch, and then I'm going to click it on the center here. And what that'll do is cast torchlight around the fire. And then I'll lock it. And if you want to turn it on or off, you can do so as the game master. So if I wanted to really see what this is how it's going to affect the lighting, I need to go and change the ambient lighting temporarily. So if I go to the lighting tool and come back to lighting, I'm going to change the preset to moonlight. Right now there's no light at all. And then go back to play mode. And this is the game master view. That's the player view. So it this kind of lights things up quite a bit. I'm going to remove the candle from the NPC just so I can see what the torch is doing or what's not doing. So if I go to the effects area on the combat tracker and just double click to remove the light. Now when I take possession of the token, that's basically what I'm seeing. This just gives me an idea of what it's going to look like for the players. And then if I want the GM view, I can just hit Control P. It gets rid of those hard shadows and you can see inside the building and such. So that's like a preview mode. Control P is preview. And then you can see the trees are kind of blocking some of the line of sight from the campfire. If you go to the campfire in the layers tool here, or the layers are, and you turn it off, you can see it's pretty dark. So it does cast quite an area of light. And these are the type of things you want to check as you create different groups of assets or different things to make your map. So just checking to make sure that the campfire is working. And then the option is for the players or for the DM is I'll leave it on, but maybe he doesn't want it on, so you can actually turn it off. And then when the players find the camp, you would just go ahead and turn it on when they start to fire. So that's an option that you can enable in Fantasy Grounds, which is really cool. You can even make a note of it somewhere in the encounter. Like I'll probably say that. I'll probably show, okay, you can take this this icon here. I might even do a little screenshot and place it inside the reference manual so that when they come to this area, that'll remind them that they can turn the map on or off. We'll see. But that is basically the extent of the lighting and the line of sight. It's really not that bad. The last step is I'm going to turn off the lighting for now, and I'm going to work on the water below. So the water doesn't even need to be fully implemented, but it kind of gives the illusion that there's a running river down here or some kind of source of water. So I'm going to go to the effects tool, which is up here on the top. To create an effects layer, down at the bottom, there's add effects layer. So if you click on that, it's going to add just a blank layer. There's nothing in that yet. And use the drop-down method on the effects type. Click on water, and what you'll notice is that the entire map is kind of warped, and that's not what you want. So we're going to click on the mask. So the mask is covering the entire map at this point. So the water effect is still there, but it's covered by a invisible layer that's going to keep that from showing everywhere. And then we're going to have a reveal area, which is this little eyeball here. And we're only going to reveal this area down here. So I'm going to come up to the edge of the water here and just kind of go through it. I'm not going to go right up to shore, because that will pull in this distortion will pull in off this wall. So I don't want that. So first thing is this area that's squared off. So like this is a rectangle. And then I'll come in and put the wavy lines in after that. So you don't have to do this in one go. So I'm going to take and trace this and just kind of come off and get a majority of it with a big rectangle. And as you can see, it's already starting to look good. Now, once I've done that, now I'm just going to focus on these edges to make it kind of wavy looking. And you could do it in groups. You don't have to have one big line. You can do it in small areas. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just kind of trace around so it picks up some of these areas where the water comes in. And that's all I'm doing here is just coming through and kind of making this area shine through. That kind of brings it up into these areas. And you notice I didn't go all the way in because there's some shoreline here. And I wanted to leave a little bit of a buffer so it doesn't show the gravel up here being pulled in. Because you want to be able to see the gravel underneath the water. I'm going to do the same thing. So holding down the Alt key, this is what gives you the irregular, unstraightened lines. So if you want to trace around and not use the actual square tool, because that's the default, you want to get some contour in here. It's the way to do it. It has to join, so that's why I'm drawing it like this. There we go. So that's the water thing. And what you can do with that is blur it. So if I blur the lines, what it will do is it will help to blend in the edges so it's not so drastic. And then I can change the amount of the size of the water. Speed can come down a hair. If you do it too much, though, it won't be as obvious. So you don't want to adjust these too far down, but it does kind of make more sense a lot of times to have it lower. And I like that they changed the default. It used to be just like in the center, and it was all crazy, and you had to mess around with it. But they have it set at a pretty decent preset level. So that looks pretty good. And then if you wanted to show turbulence, like since this is basically like a river, I could put in the next effect tool, which would necessarily doesn't have to be there, but it could be along the edges of the water or in the center where you can kind of show where the water is more turbulent, whatever you want to do. You can also put a color filter to show depth. So I want to do that here. So this is a pretty good determination. So you got this water here, and you can see the shadow a little bit from the shoreline, and that shows kind of the depth here. But I also want to put in another layer of light, or in this case, a filter of light, that will kind of give you an idea that it gets deeper as you go in. So instead of just a water tool, now I'm going to add another effects layer. And this layer is going to be a color. So color layer, adjust colors. Again, I'm going to put a mask because I don't want to change the color of the entire map. And then I'm just going to bump up blue a little bit. And I'm going to take a little sample area and see what color it looks like. So I'm just going to take a little sample area. So just reveal just a spot here. Yeah, that's good. It's just a light variation for depth. And then this is how you can adjust, how dark the color is. So I want to put a little bit of color into it, but then turn down the brightness a little. And I mean a little, because if you do it too much, it's going to really show. So I'm thinking like 47 or something like that. And then the mask tool allows it to blend in. So as you can see, it looks like a square, but if I mask it off, you can barely tell. So that's what you want for this water effect, is to kind of put a little bit more blend on it. And then what I'm going to do is, since I have that set, now I'm just going to come in and kind of lightly come through here and put some points in here. So again, I'm going to hold down the shift key and reveal just parts of this to kind of give more depth. And see, I was in the square tool, so you don't have to do that. So I'm going to hold down Alt and drag around and just pick up some of this inner area at the bottom. That's all I want to do. If you get off-centered, like I am right now, you can click on the centering tool. There we go. So that's a good thing to know. All I'm doing is kind of just giving the illusion that it's a little bit deeper in this area. That's all I'm doing. And now when we look at this, you can kind of see the color contrast here. And what I'm going to do is actually put that blue underneath the water. So I don't want the color to be on top. I want it to be under the wave, under the effect, so that it kind of flows with it. And that's basically what you're doing. And then you could adjust the blur tool. So as you can see, there's more of a pronounced line. I kind of liked it when it was blended in. So water definitely benefits from this tool, or from the blending tool. So if you blend too much, though, it's not noticeable. So you got to have to find I think 20 licks, 24, 22. There we go. Yeah, I like it a little bit less. So there you go. So there's some blending in here, but it shows, just how there's a little bit more depth in here. It's not as prominent. That's pretty good. Yep, I like it. So that's basically how you can show, depth and color variation if you need to. You could also take and put other layers on these trees. Like if you had an asset that was the same shape of this tree, you can just take that and layer it on top, rotate it, change the transparency and the brightness, and you can give it an effect like a multi-layered tree if you don't already have that. So if you have the same asset and it's just one solid color, you can take it and repeat it a few times and turn it different ways and stack it up like a Christmas tree. And each layer will be slightly different color or different shade. So you can do a lot of interesting things. So I like that. So maybe you want to put some fish in here. I mean, if you have an asset where you have little fish, you can probably put that in here. The only thing about doing that is that someone probably won't even notice it if they don't go down by the river. I mean, it's probably not worth it. But now that I have those two effects created, what I'm going to do is make a folder. I'm going to call it river, just so effects, so that when someone uses the map, they'll understand what these are or what they're for. Let's drag those in there. And what that does is it keeps it organized. And then I want to have the effect below this, not above it. So there's the river effects in that folder. So that's basically all I got for this map. Hopefully this helps you guys if you're watching this in the future or presently. This is a way to give you an insight on how to use the map tool, but also have some fun. I didn't really feel stressed out, and I think I've done this for less than an hour, so I mean that's pretty good. It's been 55 minutes. I whipped that out. I got all of it done pretty much. I don't think I need to do anything else. So that's basically what you want. You want to get to the point where it's comfortable, the map's not too huge and complicated, and you just kind of practice with the tool. That's why another reason I'm doing this series is because I want to let you see not only the good things, but also the work and the struggle and everything else that goes along with it. So this is just me learning how to use the map tool, how to get comfortable with it, and learning how to become creative with it, have fun with it, not get all stressed out. That's generally what happens in the beginning is people get all weirded out. So, try to have fun and explore the options and just, it's not something you want to do like right before a game unless you're comfortable with it. So anyhow, you have a good, wonderful holiday. Don't think I'm going to put out any more content until probably after Christmas. So I might do another one of these in the next few days, but I don't imagine I'm going to do a whole lot more. I got a lot of things. I got cooking and cleaning and Christmas stuff to do. So happy holidays, everyone. Have a great afternoon and a good weekend. And I'll be back probably Monday to start doing some more content. I don't know if I'm going to do this type of content, but I'm going to make something for you guys so that you learn how to use Fantasy Grounds. I might do a very thorough DM class online where I'm just kind of going through and setting up a very basic DM type tutorial so that people that want to run games over the holidays will have something to look at.